Hi, Model 3 summarizes the methods to study rhythms, temporality, and culture in daily life. It is a theoretical methodological assumption of this course that whenever problems concerning time or temporality are addressed, it is about rhythmics. The semantic use of the term rhythm replaces variants of the term time, such as temporal, temporals, atemporals, temporalization, and others, which usually reduce meanings to other conventional or already naturalized uses. Facing the question of how to study the notion of time of a social group, its temporality, a correspondence between different definitions of time and rhythms was developed based on musical knowledge. In music, as well as in other arts, terms such as tempo, rhythmic, rhythm, or pulse are commonly used or refer to the different appreciations of the flux of becoming, always present in every piece of music. Etymologically, the dictionary defines rhythm as timed order in the succession or occurrence of things, deriving it from the Greek term which means to flow. Its musical meanings thus proportion kept between the time of a movement and of another different one. This last definition gets close to the notion proposed here. Rhythm is the conceptual element that brings us closer to the apprehensible instant, which is, to my understanding, where the transference of minimum information for humans to communicate is tactile, the communicative syntax of every cultural system. This transference of information is made in this minimum differentiable rhythm, usually called instant, where it is given the only moment of continuity, maintaining the cognitive present in connection to its past and to its continuous coming, the future. In this sense, to study cultural rhythmics in becoming, in that instant in which the whole subjective and social past continuously recreates itself in connection to the group rhythmic in which it lives, provide us essential information on the logic that operates in the assimilation and naturalization of a certain temporality. These reinterpreted concepts relative to the study of ethnographies on temporality where social rhythms are described make possible to address the problem by analyzing the collective life rhythm of a group, the rhythm transferred by its member during daily collective activities, and thus able to be apprehended in the participant observation. Therefore, the temporality of a society can be understood from the life rhythms constitutive of a social, economic, and worldview organization, which articulate the daily nature and habits of their subjects. The articulation between rhythm and temporality was already present in the first sociological and anthropological studies on time. The main mentor of the social study of rhythm was the French ethnologist Marcel Mauss. Rhythms and symbols not only bring the aesthetic and imaginative faculties of man into play, but at the same time all his body and soul. Mauss already proposed in 1924 that rhythms contribute to articulate imaginaries and practices, and that anthropology, as well as sociology and psychology, should focus on the study of symbol and rhythm. Prior to that, in 1905, Mauss had already emphasized the importance of focusing on the social morphology of the Inuit when studying their rhythm of dispersal and concentration of individual and collective life, even arguing that each social function had its own rhythm. In one of his conferences of aesthetics at the Collège de France given in 1835, Mauss said, "Since the appearance of plastic art, notions of equilibrium have emerged, thus notions of rhythm, and since the appearance of rhythmics, are the measured. Socially and individually, man is a rhythmic animal. When describing the aesthetic phenomena, Moss formulates an alternative definition based on rhythm, reviving psychologist Wilhelm Wundt, and other pioneer of rhythms, ethnologist Franz Boas, who proposed to study rhythm in decorative arts, dance, music, and literature of native North American societies. In most words, Boas connects all art to rhythm, for where there is rhythm, generally there is something aesthetic. Where there are tones, variation in touch and intensity, generally there is something aesthetic. Prose is only beautiful when it is to some extent rhythmic and to some extent chanted. Differences in tone, touch, and feeling, all this is rhythm and all this is art. Durkheim mentions the term rhythm to refer to the time category. The calendar expresses the rhythm of collective activities, while at the same time its function is to assure their regularity. What the category of time expresses is the common time for the group, the social time. The concept of rhythm as regulator of social activities emphasizes how rhythm is embedded in every temporality. Durkheim explains that the religious life is structured in regularly repeated acts, which constitutive collective rhythms, and he uses some as experimental proof of the belief in social events of religious character. Evans Pritchard is one of the first ethnographers to stress the concept of rhythm to think the temporality of the aesthetic group. Evans Pritchard refers three layers of rhythms: physical, ecological, and social. The Nuer observe the movements of celestial bodies other than the sun or the moon, but they do not regulate their activities in relation to them, nor they use them as points of reference for the count of the seasons. Cattle needs and variation of food supply are the ones that mainly translate the ecological rhythm into the social rhythm of the year, and the contrast between ways of life at the eighth of the rainy season and of the dry season is that which provides the conceptual pose for the temporal account. These three layers enable us to understand how Nuer think time, in what Evans Pritchard describes as a count, although it is not a quantitative calculation. Chronology, for example, doesn't express itself through the numbering of years, but through the reference to the system of age groups. It is surprising to think that it is not relevant to know how many years happen in an event recapitulation, something inconceivable to any person formed in the Western temporality who orders his own life based on an account of his birthdays and what has been done in between them. The same happens with the location of a moment in the past, and that depending on which time of the year is that about. Pritchard says, the Nuer do not use names of the months for making the time of an event. Time is a relation between activities. Time doesn't have the same value throughout the year. This focus of anthropology on the rhythmic issues is completed with the emergence of subsequent studies along the 20th century, which unfortunately didn't succeed in arousing new interest. Malinowski, when explaining the Trobriand Islanders' calendar in New Guinea ruled by agricultural and social rhythms. Hall, when studying rhythms implying the synchronization processes between people and their different behaviors in monochronic and polychronic societies. Turner, when analyzing the rhythm of music and dancing into different types of Dembu rituals in Zambia. Descola, when observing rhythms of hunting journeys and the rhythm of energy consumed among the Ashwar in the jungle of Ecuador. Durand, who applies a generalized use of the term rhythmical, sometimes related to seasonal cycles and agricultural rhythmics, as well as to the recurrence of mythical cycles. Worldview, when analyzing how capitalism is imposed on the life rhythms of the Kabyle society in Algeria. In brief, Cultural rhythmics is proposed as methodology built for studying temporality among different social groups and inside them. Studying different rhythmic experiences integrated in the participant observation enable us to interpret social facts that are implicit in the everyday practices of organization, in the economic political relations, and in the group's worldviews. Recovering the phrase by Edward Hall when he refers to the cultural patterns linking time and culture as the language of time, it can be said that cultural rhythmics are the language of temporality. Rhythmics are, in this sense, a theoretical and methodological language to carry out the purpose of criticizing hegemonic temporalities and their practices. It is imposed on the life rhythms of the Kabyle society in Algeria. In addition to these works in anthropology, there are outstanding studies addressing rhythmic issues, such as the 5 on rhythm analysis, in which the interaction between notion of time, productions of space, and comprehension of everyday life is analyzed. Similarly, Bachelard applied that from a philosophical perspective to the study of the space, the imaginations, and body rhythms. Babel suggested to address the rhythms hidden in the schedules and calendars of social life from the sociology of time. Both John Dewey and Susan Langell studied the concept of vital rhythm in connection with the aesthetic experience of art and the existence of art forms. Recently, Goodman applied rhythm analysis to the study of sonic culture, the politics of frequency, and the ecology of fear. To conclude this class, and considering definitions of Module 2 and 3, how is an imaginary distinguished from the rhythmic? Let's take as an example the category progress, as an example commonly associated in the hegemonic temporality with the notion of future. Is it rhythmic or an imaginary? Progress is an imaginary and not rhythmic because progress is not a specific practice. The action of progressing is not practice since it is a cultural construction expressed in concrete practices such as sowing, harvesting, transporting, financing, or any other concrete action. A set of specific rhythms defining progress doesn't exist either. It can be conceived instead as imaginary, as a set of representations that can be conceptualized as a component of a single or several imaginaries. For example, progress is a key component either of the imaginary development or the imaginary modernity, or actually these two are constellations of the imaginary capitalism. Besides, progress can be split into more precise categories: wealth, well-being, comfort, and good living, just to mention a few. Considering, for instance, the phrase "at the rate of progress," it is precisely an image that makes us of the imaginary of the concept rate to give support to symbolic components such as change, speed, or similar.